afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs program. I'm Charity Fain, Executive Director of City Club, and I would like to welcome you all, those of you here at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB or KBPS radio, or watching on Portland Community Media's CityNet 30. Thank you for joining City Club today, March 25th, for this week's Friday Forum. In consideration of those sitting close to you and those in our radio and television audiences, I ask everyone in the room to please silence your cell phones. Today, our speaker will discuss technological innovation and the future of aging. But first, some announcements. City Club recently kicked off its From Crisis to Opportunity Premier Issues series. As part of this program, on March 29th, the club's New Leaders Council is offering a workshop where participants will attempt to successfully balance the state's budget. Other upcoming NLC events include a volunteer session at the Children's Book Bank and a panel discussion about perception versus reality on the TV show Portlandia. Our Agora committee will be hosting a panel discussion about excellence in education. We are very thankful for our New Leaders Council sponsors, DHM Research and the Port of Portland, and for our Agora sponsor, Tonkin Torp. To learn more about these programs and other events, go to the City Club website, pdxcityclub.org. City Club's annual fund sustains these Friday forums, as well as the events and research reports that help shape our region. Our new strategic plan will allow City Club to expand its capacity within both the organization and the community. But to maximize our ability to develop programs and to achieve our strategic goals, we need to raise $25,000 by the end of May. Your gift to City Club's spring annual fund campaign can make a difference and a significant impact on City Club and our region. Please make a generous contribution today using the envelopes on your table or by making a credit card donation at the back of the room where staff are ready to help you. I'd like to thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine. I'd also like to offer our appreciation to the Friday Forum corporate sponsors whose generous financial support make these time-honored City Club luncheons possible. Please join me in offering our sincere appreciation to our current sponsors, communications firm Morel Inc., utility company Northwest Natural, and the law firms of Perkins Coie and Schwabe Williamson Wyatt. We are so grateful for their support. If your company or firm would like to be a City Club sponsor, please contact City Club staff at the back of the room or call the City Club office and you can ask for me. I'll help you. And now on to our program. With thousands of baby boomers turning 65 each day, this unprecedented demographic shift will have a profound impact on communities and economies for years to come. It will be especially challenging to provide quality health care at an affordable cost to older citizens, particularly the majority who wish to remain in their homes as long as possible. Today, our speaker, Eric Dishman, will discuss new graying technologies that may enhance social engagement, disease management, cognitive support, and health care for the elderly at home. Today's speaker is the Director of Health Innovation for the Intel Archtecture Group, which is responsible for healthcare information technologies. He founded Intel's first Health Research and Innovation Lab in 1999 and was a founding member of Intel's Digital Health Group in 2005. In 2007, he was named an Intel Fellow, one of only 55 Intel executives awarded this designation in recognition of industry leadership in science, technology, and innovation. Widely recognized as a global leader in healthcare innovation, please help me welcome today's speaker, Eric Dishman.
Well, thank you, Charity, and it's a great honor to be here. It is a time-honored tradition. I always hear these on OPB and hear the glasses in the background, and it's great to actually be here in person with you. Now, I know why you're all really here. I'd like to think it's because you want to come and hear about global aging and Oregon's opportunity to lead in new technologies and services and jobs for independent living. But you're really here to see if a guy from Intel can speak in public without the use of PowerPoint and a laptop. So, call it Eric Unplugged. No video, no stills, no demos, just me. So we'll see if I can actually pull this off. I am not your typical Intel employee. I am a social scientist by training, so hopefully I can pull this off. I have a background in communication and was trained as a communication scholar. And over the last 20 years of my life, I've been spending time with teams doing anthropological field work, or what we call ethnography, living and studying the needs of real people to inform the ideas for new technology. So it is fitting that I want to begin today. I want to share something with you from fieldwork here. This was fieldwork that Intel did almost 10 years ago, studying families who were dealing with Alzheimer's here in Portland. I was in a nursing home here in downtown Portland, and it was the first day I was going in to meet some of the residents who were going to be part of this longer study, and the nursing home administrator was sort of taking me on the rounds door by door to meet the 5 seniors who were going to be part of the study that day. And as we came up to this one door, she said, "Oh, this is Larry's door." And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, "Well, he can be a bit cantankerous." And then she sort of makes a beeline down the hallway, and I'm like, I'm left here knocking on the door. And Larry, who was not all that cantankerous, he was a lovely man actually, he had a sign on his door, and it was the senility prayer, a takeoff on the serenity prayer. And it goes like this. I've kept this. So it says, "God, grant me the senility to forget the people I never liked anyway, the good fortune to run into and thank the ones that I do, and the eyesight to tell the difference." So before I forget, I want to thank the members of the City Club. I want to particularly thank Joyce DeMonin from AARP Oregon, who invited me here today. And I want to thank the guests, all of you who are here with the members today, particularly my colleagues and collaborators from Intel, from Oregon Health and Science University, from Orica Tech, the Oregon Center for Aging and Technology. I get to come up and talk about the great work that they do, and you saw some of it here today in some of the demos in the back corner. And I also want to thank Elizabeth Drinka from Senator Wyden's office. Senator Wyden, many of you know, has been a champion for aging issues for many, many years with his own background in gerontology, and he's been a key proponent of healthcare reform that we've been supporting as well. And then I want to thank the listeners on the radio and those watching on cable television. I want to thank you for paying attention to this issue of global aging and the potential for aging in place technologies, because it is one that we too often ignore in our society. And I was just thinking this morning about the recent trip that, President Obama recently did a State of the Union address, and he's been talking about the need for American competitiveness. And he's been saying we need to out-innovate, out-build, and out-compete other countries. And what I want to say to Oregon in particular, in the case of these independent living technologies, we need to out-innovate, out-build, and out-compete and be at the forefront of trying to develop new industries and services and jobs around some of the kinds of things that you've seen today and that we've been working about. It was 20 years ago this month. I was just sitting looking at a calendar, and it's hard to believe it's been 20 years. I actually started doing field work for Paul Allen, who many of us here in Portland know as the owner of the Portland Trailblazers, also the co-founder of Microsoft. I started working for his think tank 20 years ago, and I was hired as an intern to come in and do field work to try to understand what computers were going to become. It was not common for us to have home PCs at that point. They were mostly office machines, and we were trying to anticipate where was computing going to go next. And so they said, "Eric, go study some places that have no computing, no technology." So I studied a nursing home. And I went and did field work in this California nursing home for about 5 or 6 months. And we were studying the needs of the staff and the residents and the family who came to visit and the various folks who came in and out of there. And we then built some prototypes. It was the very first independent living or disease management technologies I've ever done. It was 20 years ago. We built this sort of wireless earbud system, because we would observe the staff, 2 nurses or certified nursing assistants. They're in these long hallways trying to find another staff member to help them lift a resident from one bed to another. And they couldn't know which door behind, and we weren't carrying cell phones 20 years ago. They couldn't find another staff member to help lift this person. So many times they'd do it themselves, and there's no surprise that nurses and certified nursing assistants are second only to like oil rig workers for back injuries, because they end up doing this kind of heavy lifting. So we built a wireless system that would help them be able to sort of call out and try to find other nearby staff. And the system kind of worked as long as you wore this big backpack of technology. This was hard to do 20 years ago. And we built the first remote patient monitoring technology, so just trying to get the weight and the blood pressure and some of the basic vital signs of some of the residents was enormously difficult. So we said, how can we actually embed that into watches or other kinds of technology so you don't have to go pay attention to it and do that? And we built these prototypes in this think tank down in Silicon Valley in a conference room. And we had all the people, the engineers, and all these people in Silicon Valley come through and sort of see our ideas for the future. And then we had to close this down and give the conference room back for a meeting that was after hours. So we're tearing down the sets, and we're literally standing on the rubble of all of our ideas. And somebody said, Eric, you asked the wrong question. I was like, what do you mean? They said, well, it's not so much how do you use technology to build a better nursing home, but why don't we figure out how to use technology so the idea of a nursing home doesn't even exist in 50 years? Now, I am not anti-nursing home. I'm not anti-institutional care. There is a time and place, and many of the seniors in our studies, once they go into a community, are like, why did I take so long to get here? I've been trying to mow my own darn yard. I've been trying to deal with this 2,500 square foot home, and I've been cut off from people. It's like great to have a community here. But at the same time, we need to think about how do we create more choice and options for where and how people age. And I think technology has a role to play in that. And in fact, that's been my quest for the last 20 years. And we're making some progress towards that. How do we use technology to help people age in place with good health, with dignity, with meaning, with purpose, and choice about where we live, not just healthcare? Now, we're making progress towards that end at Intel. Over the last 10 years, we've studied 1,000 elderly households in 20 countries and 250 hospitals, clinics, and long-term care facilities. We have funded over 100 university grants in these independent living technologies in the United States and Europe. We've launched a new company called Care Innovations. It's an Intel GE company to go focus on home health and independent living technologies. We've started CAST and ETAC and Orica Tech, and you're going to hear more about these acronyms in a minute. And the fact remains, I can't use the very technologies that my lab and my companies have been making to help care for my own parents who live across the country in North Carolina. And the problem is there's not really enough innovation in science yet. There's not enough evidence yet about which of these technologies are good and helpful and which are not. There's not enough retraining of the workforce of doctors and nurses and certified nursing assistants and new kinds of care workers that we haven't imagined yet to use these technologies to good effect. There's been no rethinking of the regulation, and there's really too many perverse healthcare incentives that are helping us do healthcare the right way for people. So my thesis today, and I'm going to unpack this over the rest of our time here, is Oregon could and should be the state that answers these challenges and invents what's next for the future of aging to solve our own healthcare cost crises and needs here in the state, as well as grow a new business sector to grow jobs for Oregonian. We are witnessing the birth of the internet for transforming elder care and healthcare, and it is here. Let's not miss it. So why is Intel paying attention to global aging? Why are we doing healthcare reform? Why do we need to transform long-term care as we know it? And my simple answer to this is global aging is a force in society to reckon with that rivals global warming, and it's going to change Intel's business, it's going to change the lives of our employees, and it's going to change the society into which we're trying to be a successful company. Now, I want you to listen to these numbers. Back in 1950, there were 3,000 people on the planet over the age of 100. By 2050, there will be 6 million. In a 100-year period, we're going from 3,000 to 6 million centenarians on the planet. Now, back in the year 2000, when we were all paying attention to the Y2K challenge, there were 600 million people aged 60 and above on the planet. Those numbers doubled to 1.2 billion by 2025, which is just around the corner, and almost double again to over 2 billion by 2050. It's a double-double in 50 years. Healthcare as usual, long-term care as usual, is not ready and is not sustainable given the demographics and the age wave that's coming. Now, I've been thinking about Japan, and it's in all of our hearts and minds and all of our headlines today. We're just seeing the latest news coming out of Japan today that, God forbid, there's actually a core breach there. And it is the tragedy of the tsunami and the tragedy of the earthquake, but even amidst all of that footage, there's also another story to tell. If you look at that footage, Japan is a gray culture. Japan is already at 25% of its population over the age of 65. And you see it in the footage of the people being rescued there today. And in fact, it started to come to the consciousness and to the attention of the news reporters who are doing that. Now, Japan's going to go to 38% of its population over the age of 65 by 2050. And they're going to only have 2 workers supporting every 1 retiree by that date. In the United States right now, we're about 5 to 1, 5 workers for every 1 retiree. We're going to go to 3 to 1. But Japan is a harbinger of what's to come for many other countries. Now, we in the United States cannot afford to spend 25% of our gross domestic product on healthcare. It's just not sustainable. Now, today in Oregon, we've got about 4 million people. 14% of the Oregonians are over the age of 65 today, and tomorrow, with another 10, 15 years, we'll be closer to 23 to 25%, a quarter of the population over the age of 65. Now, a lot of people will ask me about Intel. They'll think about Intel, and they think about us as a large employer in the state. We're the largest private employer in the state. We've got 15,000 employees. The recent announcements that we're going to build a new fab right down the road from here in Hillsboro, $3 billion additional investment will make those numbers go up even more. That's all good news. But we are not just 15,000 employees. We are 15,000 families, and if you count the extended families and the retirees, many more than that in Oregon, who have good pay and benefits, but are still struggling to manage with our own chronic conditions, are still struggling to help our parents to age in place, whether they live a mile away from us or 1,000 miles away, and are still struggling to deal with a healthcare system that is fragmented and often perverse. And we have good care and benefits. Now, Intel is interested in global aging because we are more than just a chip company. We are an innovation company, and we like to tackle hard problems, and this global aging challenge is a hard problem. And it will force us to reimagine computing again, and it will hopefully grow our company again. So this is a business interest, not just a corporate social responsibility interest. But how might technology help? So I want to give you some examples around Alzheimer's. I am the first to tell you that technology is no magic pill here that's going to solve our problem. None of us believe that. But I also don't believe that we can solve our healthcare challenges globally without incorporating technology. We are simply not going to keep up with that age wave and create enough new doctors and nurses and people to care for this society without leveraging technology in some powerful ways. And true healthcare reform is not going to really succeed until we do what I call skill shifting, place shifting, and time shifting care. We need to skill shift a lot of chronic disease management to volunteers, to family members, and into empowered patients themselves. Train them to care for themselves and their own families, and not use hospitals and clinics and ambulances and nurses and doctors for every care encounter. There simply won't be enough of them. We need to place shift where care occurs. The lion's share of care that we provide in acute care environments today can be done in the home and the community. Sometimes without technology, and certainly with technology, it can be done at home in the community, which is where we would rather be doing that. And then in terms of time shifting, we need to be catching problems well before they happen. Prevent the falls from happening, prevent chronic disease, and not wait until it's a 911 call or an emergency situation, and then we pay enormous amounts of money. I call this Humpty Dumpty healthcare to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, right? That model is not sustainable and not scalable. Now, we started at Intel and said, okay, let's think in the case of Alzheimer's how we might skill shift, place shift, and time shift care. We started with a 100 household study here in Portland and Las Vegas. Why Alzheimer's? I mean, I'll be honest with you. In part, I had witnessed as a 16-year-old my grandmother's Alzheimer's and the impact on our entire family. We were lucky in that Grandma Kerr only lived with advanced Alzheimer's for probably 3 years. In our study, we saw families dealing with Alzheimer's for sometimes 15 and 20 years. Right? And the impact is enormous, financially, socially, emotionally, on everyone involved in it. So I've been thinking about this since age 16. But if you also just look at the numbers, the 4.5 million people with Alzheimer's in the United States cost the same to treat as all of the people with diabetes in the United States. You see tons of focus on diabetes, but it's like Alzheimer's alone has been shown that it could bankrupt Medicare within another 15 to 20 years, just that one disease and that one condition because of its big impact on society. So we said, okay, and this is an interesting place to start. And if you look back and say, okay, not full-blown Alzheimer's, but the number of people who say that they have cognitive challenges that they could use some assistance with worldwide is over 100 million people. These start to be large numbers with large impacts on society. So we said that's where we'll start. We took our Intel social scientists like me, some of the Intel nurses and doctors, engineers into the field, starting observing and living with families. And I'm just going to introduce you to 4 of them. These are real people, fake names. Ben, who was 81, a teacher from Eugene. I remember him well. He seemed completely cognitively healthy to me until we were going to go out to his garden, and we were putting on his jacket, it being Oregon. It was raining, not surprising. And he couldn't remember the process of actually buttoning his shirt. And in fact, that was one of his biggest challenges. He could remember names and faces and other kinds of things. He could not remember the processes of buttoning a shirt. And you can imagine to young engineers of us sitting there, we didn't know that anybody on the planet existed that didn't know how to button their shirt, let alone potentially tens of millions of them. Second example, Susan, 63, very early stage Alzheimer's and very young to be getting it, electrical engineer. She lived in Portland. Again, when we met her and her husband for the first time, I had no idea, I couldn't remember which of them had ostensibly been diagnosed. It was the first day I was going out to meet all the families. And at one point she said, well, why don't I go get you some coffee? And after about 30 minutes, she had not come back, and her husband said, we better go check on Susan. And we go in, and Susan, I'll never forget it, is standing at a cabinet, and tears are just pouring down her eyes, and she's like, I know how to make coffee, I know how to make coffee, I know how to make coffee. And again, it's like we had no idea that anybody on the planet needed help with simple activities of daily living like that. You know, what might we have sitting in our labs that's never seen the light of day that could help address that challenge and that problem? Third example, Ed, age 70 in Las Vegas. He was a carpet store owner, owned a small carpet store. 70 years old, and his wife and his co-workers knew that he had Alzheimer's. He was forgetting the names and faces of best friends and clients, and he would actually had this intercom system where he would turn it on, and his assistant would be listening from the next room, and if he was starting to struggle with a client because he couldn't remember their name right there in front of him, the admin would call in on the phone and sort of say, this person is Jerry, and he's been a client of yours for 25 years, right? This guy is trying to cope and trying to do his business while the names and faces are escaping him of best friends and key customers. And then finally, a woman named Emma, 45 at the time, Portland reporter who had to leave her reporting job. I remember her so clearly. She felt so much enormous guilt. She was a caregiver for a husband or a father with Alzheimer's who lived in her home. And, you know, she'd say, Eric, you know, I'm not a bad daughter, but I don't have anybody else to help me care for him, and I leave him alone for an hour and a half or 2 hours at a time because I have to go buy groceries. I don't have anybody other way of doing it. And she's like, I'm just terrified when I'm gone because he could fall while I'm gone. And, you know, if anybody found out, you know, social services would be in here. But she's like, I don't know what else to do. And we saw this time and time again. So the safety challenges that caregivers were going through. So you can imagine doing this incredibly difficult field work. We came back with more need and more ideas. We generated over 200 ideas of different technologies that we thought could help. Some that might help with the early detection of dementia, some that might help with reminding and coaching somebody to do their activities of daily living, that safety challenges, caregiver support, so many opportunities that we thought technology might be able to sort of be part of the solution, but not the total solution. And we prototyped some of these. I'll give you a couple examples of some of the first ones we did. Think back to Susan, the woman who couldn't make coffee. The very first prototype we built, we took some motion sensors, and these kind of switch sensors that would let you know whether a door or a drawer had been opened. And we built this system. Our idea, our hope, our prayer really, was that we could use these to help trigger reminder videos that the family had shot for Susan in her home about how to make coffee or how to do tasks around the house. So the idea is, if she's standing there, you know, for 30 minutes at the cabinets and opening them and closing them and opening them and closing them, it's like we could pretty closely figure out that that's not the normal pattern of what she would do in the kitchen. And then could we play a video or say, hey, do you need some help, and reach out to her. Now, this is a hard computer science program to actually make this work and be useful. It kind of worked, the prototype. We could certainly track the activity of daily living and tell that she was having trouble compared to her norm, but intervening at just the right moment in time to help her continue to do that task is a very difficult computer science problem that we need people to work on. Second example, and this is dealing with the sort of epidemic of loneliness and isolation that we see, not just with seniors dealing with Alzheimer's, but across the world. And it's really about how can we use technology to help maintain and sustain social support. But in this case, for somebody like Ed, who was having the name lookup problem, right? He can't remember the names and faces of key people around him. So again, we use some simple motion sensors in the home to try to approximate whether a visitor had come to see you. And we put a little box on the phone that would sort of collect information about how much time you were on the phone. It didn't know who you were calling. It wasn't recording all your phone calls, just were you on the phone or not. And some of these seniors were actually even then starting to use PCs to do email, so we could put a little software thing on there that would look at how much time were they using the personal computer to actually socially engage with other people. Collected all that data for 6 months, so we get what you can think of as a social health index, your normal pattern of social interaction based on the number of visits, the amount of time that you're on the phone, and the amount of time that you're using the computer. Now, when we turn this system on, the families would say to us, oh, your system's not working. And we'd say, why do you think that? This is research. We've put in triple redundant systems. And they'd say, well, your system says that 4 days have gone by and no one's contacted my mother. It's like, guess what? 4 days have gone by and no one's contacted your mother. So the first value proposition to the families was a wake-up call that while they may have cell phones stitched to the side of their face as busy boomers doing their jobs, their parents were often going 1, 5, 7, 10 days without any social contact. So once we had that system in place, we built 2 simple interventions. We took an LCD screen. This was kind of hard to do 10 years ago, but now these are cheap and widely available. Set it next to the landline phone so that this person who's struggling and too afraid to answer the phone because you don't know whether it's a stranger or a loved one who's calling, it would show the picture of the person who was calling, this is your daughter, and a little short snippet about what you last talked about, just text on the screen that appeared there. And the way that information got in there was each party would type in a few notes into a database that went up to the internet. And the more context you put in there about your last call with mom, the better call that you had next, right? A lot of people have no dementia. We're like, I need this system now, right? And over time, we built a second system that would help visualize for the senior how they're doing. So imagine the senior in the center of their universe on this screen and icons of the key people that they interact with. Now, one woman in the study called this the inheritance detection system, right? Because the good kids, their icons are right in here close because they're calling and they're visiting and so forth, right? And the bad kids are way out here, and then you got empirical evidence right there on the screen, right? So, but these were simple, hard to do then, but imagine doing these now. It would be very simple to do these on iPhones and smartphones that are out there. And the key here was it was an enabling tool for these folks who were dealing. And suddenly they were no longer afraid to answer the front door, answer the phone, because they had a little bit of support. A lot of times they would fake the conversation. It's like, okay, this says it's my mom. I don't really remember who my mom is. And they would kind of fake it enough because they've got a little cheat sheet there. But then once they got into the call, they kind of recognized it and kept going, right? Simple use of technologies. So the third one and the last one I want to sort of share with you is an example of what I call skill shifting I talked about earlier. And this is, again, sort of trying to figure out how to reduce loneliness and sort of solve a transportation problem. This was particularly in rural villages in Ireland where we did some of this work, and in some rural parts of Oregon. We would observe the ambulance in a small town in Oregon going out to a call, 911 call, and more often than not, it was a senior who didn't have an urgent situation but was alone and isolated and knew if they dialed 911, somebody was going to come and visit them. And we've seen this worldwide. But the problem is if that one ambulance that town has is off doing that and somebody in another part of the town has a heart attack during that time, that resource is not available to get them there for their stroke or their heart attack or a more urgent situation. Bad utilization of resources. So there's a lot of seniors in the community who have time on their hands and want to give back. Built a simple 1-800 line for seniors to be able to call. And the seniors who wanted to volunteer could come into the community health center for 4 hours, man the phones to be available for those that just needed someone to talk to. And your skill shifting are offloading that social function from doctors and nurses who quite frankly didn't have time and not a good uses of their resources to do that to other people in the community. But we took that one step further when we built a system that allowed some of those folks coming in, the volunteers coming in the community health center, could actually sit in their robe from their own home and use call center technology so that they're sitting comfortably in their own home to man the phone for 4 hours as opposed to coming into the community health center. But we took that one step further by taking off-the-shelf GPS technologies, putting it into the cars of seniors who still drove in the village, and they could choose to share the routing information with kind of a Google Earth map-up application with other seniors in the community who could no longer drive. And guess what? You know, you'd start to see, oh, you drive to the same hair salon I used to go to on Tuesdays. Can I go with you? Sure, I'll pick you up. Solves a transportation problem, solves a health problem because you're keeping people socially engaged, and solves a resource problem because you're using the right resources for the right level of care. Right? Simple technologies potentially doing game-changing things in the communities. Now, these were some of the initial prototypes that we built. This got lots of press attention. I got thousands of emails. I still get them because many of these people do have Alzheimer's and they forget that they emailed me the day before. I'm not trying to make fun of them. It's just the way that it is, and I calmly respond each time when I can. And the challenge is there's still tons of need, but there's no investment, and particularly back then there was no investment, no evidence, no technology and aging conferences. So we held a mind meld conference, what I call a mind meld conference down the street in Hillsborough. We invited many of the folks from Oregon Health and Science University, from their biomedical engineering department, their neurology department. Remember Chris Castle was the president of OHSU at the time, keynoted the event for us. We brought together citizens from the community dealing with Alzheimer's, technologists from the community and from Intel, and it was a mind meld. It was just like, what needs do you have? Well, what technologies do you have? Well, what's going on in the mind and in the body and in the brain with Alzheimer's? And no one had really sort of done this before. And that was the genesis of many things. I mentioned some of those acronyms before. Out of that conference came ETAC, the Everyday Technologies for Alzheimer's Care program with the Alzheimer's Association. This was our grant-making mechanism to start to say, maybe there's something to these independent living technologies and we need to fund them. We started to form CAST nationally, the Center for Aging Services Technologies. You can go to www.agingtech.org, and we said we need a national organization to start advocating for home and community-based care for seniors and the role that innovation and technology might play there. We built the Trill Center, Technology Research for Independent Living Center in Ireland, and we have a cohort of seniors there that we work with who co-invent these technologies and test them out. And I'll put links to all of these on our blog site. So if you go to blogs.intel.com/healthcare, I'll put links to all of these other kinds of things on there so you can sort of look at them. And you know, all of these efforts, all of these acronyms were aiming for these big, audacious goals saying, let's fundamentally change the vision of aging and long-term care given global aging. And we had a lot of what-if scenarios. So I'm just going to share with you what are the what-ifs that were sort of driving these efforts. What if we could reduce the costs of chronic care by a factor of 10? What if we could eliminate medication errors completely and give seniors the confidence to take the right medicine at just the right time? What if we could slow or even prevent the onset of cognitive decline, or at least give people tools to maintain their memory, their confidence, and their dignity as they're dealing with memory loss? What if we could empower families and patients themselves with new tools to be a proactive part of their own care team as opposed to a passive recipient of healthcare? What if we could use social networking tools to wipe out this epidemic of loneliness that I've talked about here? What if we could use technology to redefine what retirement means for seniors in their own terms so they don't have to leave work but can do work in different ways and use their skills and their innate capabilities continuously as they retire? What if we could prevent 75% of falls from ever happening in the first place? And ultimately, what if we could move 50% of care that's done in institutional settings like hospitals and clinics and nursing homes today into the home within 10 years? If we had set that, if the president had set that as an audacious goal of healthcare reform, I believe we'd have a very different attitude towards it now, because we'd be aiming for something that's audacious and exciting and could have big impact on society. So achieving answers to these what-if scenarios is what true healthcare reform is about. And this was the birth of Orica Tech, the Oregon Center of Aging and Technology. Orica Tech was Oregon's mind meld, or our mashup for kind of innovation on aging. Formerly, Orica Tech is a center at OHSU. It was funded initially by Intel, and Jeff Kay, who runs Orica Tech, and I applied for an NIH grant, a Roybal Center grant, that helped fund some of the initial infrastructure to build Orica Tech. But it's not just Portland or Intel or OHSU. It's PSU, the computer science and the aging program there, the OSU gerontology program, many other companies like Elite Care, Bill's here today, from Elite Care, Spry Learning, many not-for-profits, Pacific Retirement Services, and long-term care providers who are experts and sort of know how to do this. Care Wheels, Claude is here today from there, and many individuals from government and community services and so forth. And basically what we have now is a sort of grassroots organization held together through passion more than by budget, trying to figure out how to make Oregon a leader on independent living technologies and disease management technologies for the home. There's a Portland lab downtown at OHSU in the new lab down there where we start to test these technologies and build them initially and bring seniors in to kick the tires on them and see if they work. We have a living lab of about a couple of dozen elderly homes in the Portland metro area who, once it's kind of ready to leave the lab and sort of go out and test it in their real home environments, they can start to do that. We've worked with Mirabella, full disclosure. I'm on the board of Mirabella, those of you that know Mirabella Portland, new continuing care retirement center in downtown Portland on the waterfront, to outfit that community with some infrastructure that would allow us to do research with members there over time who choose to do that. And we have a 300 household cohort in the larger Portland metro area who have been studying over the last 5 years. And this is unprecedented data that no one else on the planet has, where we've taken some of these sensor network technologies, some of these internet technologies, and been tracking. These were cognitively healthy 80-year-olds at the beginning of the study, and they're now turning 85. And unfortunately, the incidence of Alzheimer's or other memory loss is about 50% once you go from 80 to 85. But we're going back now to be able to see, was it the changes in how you walk from your bed to your kitchen in the morning that the best indicator that there was a problem? Is it the changes in your social health that I gave before? Is it the changes in how these seniors are playing video games like solitaire every day? You're losing more games than you used to compared to your own norm, or it's taking you longer to make each move. This is kind of an embedded cognitive test in an everyday activity of playing a game. Now, not all of these are going to bear fruit, but some of these may be game-changing for looking at the discovery and the onset of Alzheimer's, or may actually help us differentiate different kinds of Alzheimer's behaviorally in the future. And so we've done a wide range of projects in Orica Tech. Online coaching, how do you help coach seniors from a distance using the internet? How do you continue this theme of activities of daily living and use sensing and other kinds of devices to help know when there's a problem and help them go do that everyday task for themselves? I mentioned the cognitive games. And the last example I want to kind of give you is we've done a lot of work on falls. One of those audacious what-ifs I said is, what if we could prevent 75% of falls from ever happening? Now, my wife is here today. Her grandmother passed away from a fall not that long ago. It was a pretty horrible experience because she had fallen and tripped over her oxygen tank and broke her pelvis, was sent to the hospital. Was in the hospital. They got her recovered enough to come back, not to the independent living part, but to the assisted or to the nursing home part of the facility. That night, the staff, here's this two-person lift again, threw her from one bed to another, rebroke the pelvis, sent her back into the hospital, and nobody there looked at her chart that she had just come from to see that she was actually allergic to the prescription Tylenol or whatever it is they gave it for pain. Gave her that, and she died from the complications of these series of medical errors that all came from that fall. Now, I work at Intel, I speak English, I make a good living, I can call senators and CEOs of long-term care facilities personally, I'm an expert on aging in place technologies, I've studied falls, and I can't stop this from happening to my family. What happens to somebody who doesn't have English at disposal that I do, or resources or networks that I have, right? We are all, regardless of your socioeconomic status, experiencing these challenges in our lives. And it ends up sometime later, after all of these falls, the state will send out a survey to somebody who fell. Many times they're no longer living. And it says, what were you doing when you fell? That's the understanding that we have, a survey that somebody filled out months after they've fallen to try to tell you what were they doing when they fell. So what we've done in this case is we've built some prototypes of what we call the magic carpet, a series of sensored grids in the carpet that are looking at how fast you can walk down a hallway and how that changes over a period of time, or the amount of postural sway. As we all stand up here, if you stand, we all have kind of a certain amount of rocking back and forth, heel to toe that we did. Looking at changes of that over a period of time might be a great indicator that you're at risk for falls. We have a little wearable computer. I won't go through the whole demo here since we don't have a screen here, but this is a matchbox-sized computer, can go in your pocket, can go on your shin, and we're looking at things of kinematic motion and trying to understand for the first time what's actually going on with the senior's body in their homes. And I'll tell you now, we believe that a big majority of these falls are being caused by two problems: medication mix or muscle mass problems. Medication mix because their specialists and doctors aren't talking to one another and nobody knows what everybody has mom on. Well, often we can see in the data streams the day that they got back from a doctor because some new prescription has put their balance out of whack compared to their own norm that we've been tracking, or we're simply not getting our 10,000 steps a day and they're losing muscle mass. So we're not trying to prevent the fall 10 seconds before it happens, but 10 months before it happens and intervene long before that. So I've given you a few examples here today. And you might think, well, gosh, Eric, everything's going fine. You've just mentioned some policy work, some not-for-profits. Intel spun off this new company, Care Innovation. Everything's great. What do you need from us? You know, Orica Tech's here. And I would say to you, Orica Tech is a grassroots and passion-driven effort by Oregonians. It is a shoestring budget. It has no ability to scale beyond the 300 homes that we've done so far, and not even the ability to sustain that over a period of time. This is an unfunded mandate with no strategic plan for the state and no lasting support. We need to prioritize independent living, whether it's through Orica Tech or some other means, and focus our efforts on independent living like we've done for wave energy, like we've done for biotech. And we need to bluntly ask ourselves as a state, what future industries could we lead in? Now, Oregon has a lot of advantages in this place of independent living. You've got Orica Tech and all the things that I've just talking about as a head start compared to a lot of other states. We have an international reputation with ministers of health of China and others coming through, seeing what we're doing, and we show them all our cool demos, and they're like, this is great, and we don't sort of really admit to them that we're holding on by a thread, right? And they're going back to their countries and coming in and asking us if they can apply to Orica Tech for $100 million grants. It's like, you can apply, but you're not getting one. Now, if you think about the needs of our own state, right, we are in the top 10 of an aging population, so we have our own needs to figure out how we're going to care for our own aging population. We have more flexible regulatory and licensure in this state than other states so that we can try out new care services and models. We have a large IT presence here, not only with Intel, but many other tech companies. We're the right size and geography of a state. California's too big to go try this experiment, and Delaware's too small. We've got a mix of geography and size that's quite good. We're the gateway to the Pacific Rim, right? We're already doing collaborations with many other Asian countries. I just came back from an event where I spoke to APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, 23 Asian countries. They're ahead of us on this age wave curve, and they are investing significantly to go try to build infrastructure for their own seniors to age in place, as well as to be at the forefront of owning the intellectual property and the services to market those to the rest of the world. And then we've got political leadership. I mentioned Senator Wyden is a background in gerontology. Peter DeFazio is a gerontologist, right? Some of our national leaders are actual experts in gerontology, which is quite rare. In fact, I have a quote from Senator Wyden. This was during the healthcare reform bill. He said, when you consider all the costs, both budget and societal, it turns out that bolder reform is actually cheaper than tinkering around with the edges of the current system. And I would say that that's true of long-term care no less than it is healthcare. We need bold reform. Now, I've heard from Bruce Goldberg on Think Out Loud and OPB and other forums last week that Oregon is getting its act together and really trying to be at the forefront of healthcare reform, and that we're thinking hard about the utter cultural transformation that we're talking about here. And that's what it's going to take. That's what it's going to require. And then lastly, this is our history and heritage as a state. Other states, other countries know Oregon as the inventors of assisted living. We largely created that model of care and farmed it out to the rest of the world. We are known as the inventors of hospice and end-of-life care, and that became standards in other parts of the world. It's like the rest of the world is waiting, saying, okay, Oregon is about what's next in aging. Let's take that heritage and move it forward and figure out how to do that. And shame on us if we don't get our act together to lead on this front. So I want to close here by saying, what would I ask us to do? I've testified about these issues to Congress for 20 years now. Each time I just go in and say, same thing I said last time, but with more urgency. And I sort of feel like that right now. The EU is investing over €1 billion to fund research in this world of independent living technologies, but we don't have that here in the US. The EU has a new partnership called the Global Coalition, or the Innovation Partnership on Healthy and Active Aging, and are putting together policy plans to make this happen. APEC, I mentioned in Asia, are doing the same thing. So what should Oregon do to rise to the occasion? First, I'd ask the governor to give us the assignment to develop a state response to global aging. What is our plan as a state to respond to global aging? Second, let's commission an inventory of the kinds of assets that we have here in independent living, right? I don't know them all myself, right? What have we got? What are we missing? Third, let's take some of the curriculum development that we're doing for healthcare reform and the new kinds of care workers in acute care setting and do the same thing in long-term care. What new kinds of long-term care workers exist? How do we train them to use these technologies to do remote and home and community-based care? Fourth, every time we're going out and building new infrastructure, whether it's broadband around the state or electronic health records to hospitals and clinics or insurance exchange information infrastructure that we're putting in place, make sure we're building it to develop aging in place capacity. Don't stop at the edge of the hospital campus. Push that capacity all the way into the home and into the community. Fifth, let's figure out how to leverage the 300 household cohort that we have in Portland and extend that to 10,000 households in the state. If we built the research infrastructure before any other state to test these things on a larger scale, no other state would actually be able to compete with us if we built that R&D infrastructure. And then finally, let's set an audacious goal. Right? Let's take it as a state, a 2020 vision that says, let's move 50% of care in Oregon that's done in institutional settings today to the home within 10 years. Is it 50%? Is it 10 years? I don't know. But if we set the goal, we'll start to put policies in place that get us there. Now, I know the skeptics in the audience will say, Eric, you're crazy, right? You're a dreamer. And I'd say I'm not the only one. There's budget cuts. There's cuts to home and community-based services are likely with what's happening. You're just crazy to think this is going to happen. And what I would say to you is this. First of all, if we cut home and community-based care services, we may balance the budget in 1 year, but we may bankrupt the state in 3. We know that home and community-based care is a better place to do care. And we know that it's a place where people want to be. And we know it's a better way to do care from a cost point of view if you look at it over time. So what I would just sort of close with is say to you the following. The famous Jack Kerr, you don't know him, but he was my grandfather who was 99. His son was one of the designers of the space shuttle engine, and when he was 10 years old, he told my grandfather, hey, someday, Grandpa, we're going to go to the moon. And my grandfather tells this story in his memoir where he said, I thought my son was crazy. I thought, well, a little 10-year-old doesn't know very much, right? And of course, later on, my uncle and others helped us go to the moon and then eventually sort of develop the shuttle. So my grandfather says, I learned long ago that you should never accept the possibility of something being impossible. And what I would say to you is we need to sort of follow that motto and let Oregon lead in independent living technologies. Thanks very much.
The first question for our speaker will be from our Friday Forum host. Our host today is City Club Governor Leslie Moorhead. Leslie is a consultant providing financial management services for small businesses. Leslie served on City Club's research board for 5 years and is currently the secretary of the Board of Governors. She received the City Club's Research Award in 2007 and the club's Member of the Year Award in 2010. Leslie.
Thank you, Charity. Eric, I'm so glad you talked at the end of your speech about the global part, because that leads right into my question. I've been lucky enough to live in a variety of countries for short periods of time over the years, and it is true that different countries have different attitudes towards family structures and the dignity of elderly people and different attitudes about disabilities. So since your technology is intended and truly is global, since your research has studied so many different cultures around the world, can you tell us about the intersection of multicultural characteristics with technology transfer and adoption of new technologies, and where is it slower or faster than what we would hope for or recognize here, and can you give us some specific examples?
Great question. You know, it's interesting. We did our field work in Italy, and it's always been a wake-up call to me cross-culturally. We were there with a translator in this lovely sort of plaza with this elderly couple, and I didn't speak Italian, and you know, they didn't speak English, but somebody translating, and I sort of kept asking them about nursing homes. And the translator would do their bit in Italian and come back and, can you try again? And you know, long story short, they didn't have a way to translate nursing home. The notion of a nursing home didn't exist for them. That right away, when you start to look at different countries, reminds us that these ways of delivering care that we take for granted, that we think are somehow God-given or natural, are just human inventions. Right? Hospitals are a human invention. We created them in the 1770s. It's not the way that we have to set up things to do care, right? So that cross-cultural perspective sort of, in some ways, is incredibly freeing because you sort of realize, these are just humans getting together and organizing things in this way. There are other ways that we can actually do it. And on the technology front, what I would say is there's another reason why other countries are ahead of us in trying to own this global aging or these sort of gray technologies for global aging initiatives. And that's because they don't have the broadband infrastructure put into the ground like we built. They went straight to wireless. They don't have hospitals and nursing homes that they've got to continue to pay for over and over again, so they're not trying to protect them. If there's a better way to do hospital at home, which they're doing in other parts of the world, they'll just do it because they're not trying to protect 150 years of history of doing it the old way. So I think the lessons learned by other parts of the world are these are human creations, and we can tear them down and rebuild them however we choose.
We will now take questions from the floor. Asking questions at Friday Forums is a privilege of City Club membership. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. If I flash the question mark card, it means we're waiting for your question. Thank you so much.
We always get the cost question, and it's a really great question. And what I would say is, first of all, even something like that magic carpet isn't nearly expensive as you might think. I mean, particularly when you're comparing it to the kinds of enormously expensive medical equipment that we put in hospitals to put people back together again. Somehow, as a country, we are willing to invest tens to hundreds of billions of dollars to go create the next piece of MRI equipment that may or may not be better at scanning the hip fracture that you had than the previous version. But we're not willing to spend tens of millions to go try to prevent falls and that hip fracture from ever happening in the first place. I mean, it's sort of bizarre. So you think these technologies are that expensive, they're really not. Some of the things that we've done are $15 to $30 to $100 of technology costs on top of a broadband PC that many people around the world already have. Now, there's always going to be those who don't have any, right? And we need to continue to subsidize folks who don't have access to these. But when we go do our studies, we do them across a full range of socioeconomic status. And we go and do it in many countries because, again, in Europe and other parts of the world, seniors there are already using interactive television or cell phone-based healthcare systems and have been for many years. So what we do in the US, we can't extrapolate to the rest of the world necessarily. So you really got to go understand, you know, the life stage of being older, the cohort coming through. Boomers are going to be much more familiar with PCs than today's seniors have been. And you got to understand the culture that you're designing into. And that's partly why we go all over the world to do this kind of work.
Joyce DeMonin, City Club member. I'm a boomer, and I know most boomers are dealing with caregiving. Either they have been, they are, or they will be. And a lot of the new technologies that Intel, Orica Tech is talking about will directly impact aging in our society. How can the boomers who are doing caregiving help policy changes that will make some of these technologies possible so we can all have a more independent life as we age?
I think boomers can and will transform long-term care and healthcare, and I hope they will, as they have every other institution in our society. What I would say is, it might be overwhelming when I say to you, hey, let's set an audacious goal for the state of moving 50% of care to the home in 10 years. That's a 2020 vision, and that'll take us at least 10 years to do. There's something you can do in 10 minutes, and I would say write to your governor, or write to your local legislators and your state legislatures and say, hey, I want independent living technologies to help take care of my parents, and I want my state to lead in the development of those. It wouldn't take that much attention from boomers to sort of galvanize action around there. Today, this action is missing. Most of the health reform and innovation efforts in the United States are focused on making hospitals even better hospitals, or clinics even better clinics. I'd like us to say, declare a moratorium on building any new hospitals and clinics for 10 years and force us to figure out how to do things in the home and community, which is going to be cheaper and higher quality of life. If more people start demanding that, I think the market will create itself.
Hi, Joanne Kahn, City Club member and Intel spouse. First, I want to compliment you on your passion for this subject. And during your talk, I was thinking a lot about our land use patterns and how they affect the isolation and other issues you talked about. And so I was wondering if you're working with any urban designers or other kinds of land use kinds of issues, and if you could talk more about the Mirabella and what you're doing there.
I think the movement towards building communities from the ground up so that they are elder-friendly and sort of ready for supporting aging in place is definitely a must. There's some interesting places like in Cincinnati and others where they're really trying to think about all the pieces that you need to bring together. This has been part of our challenge from the policy level. It's not really about the technology. I'm the Intel guy here to talk about the technology, and there are certainly some unbelievably innovative things and new science that we need to do in the new technology. The challenge has been where in government, whether at the state level or the federal level, can we stand that allows us to pull all the threads together that we need to do to create aging in place neighborhoods: the transportation infrastructure, the broadband infrastructure, the education infrastructure, the housing infrastructure. And the challenge is pulling all of those threads together, because it's not just one or the other. We have a new book coming out called Planning to Stay that Henry Cisneros, the former HUD secretary, has put together. I wrote the technology chapter on it. But we've really tried to look holistically at urban design, universal design, and all these elements and how you could bring it together. Yes, ostensibly for helping with aging in place, but to be honest with you, if we just built our lives like this, it would be really beneficial to people of all ages, and we're certainly trying to do that. I am not an architecture or design expert at all, so I know that we've done some things at Mirabella. I know folks like Bill Reed here at his facility in Elite Care are doing amazing things, from being LEED certified and sort of leading on how do you build these facilities and make them sort of energy friendly, as well as sort of design friendly for seniors and for people of all ages. But that mentality is one that we really need to institute into the state and say, how do we create a place from which we can stand to pull all of those levers, because that's what it's going to take to create truly sustainable neighborhoods, not just green neighborhoods, but gray neighborhoods.
Hi, Eric. Bob DeVee, City Club member. Enjoyed the talk. In a time when we see institutions who are investors just awash in cash, and that cash is looking for good investments, why do you suppose the technologies you're talking about and the institutions you're talking about are so starved for capital?
There's a number of reasons. I think the first and foremost is we have a cultural age bias in our country that makes it not sexy to work on these kinds of topics. I've had hundreds of companies say to me, yeah, we've seen the demographics, we see this as an enormous market opportunity, but we don't want our brand associated with old people. I'm just being blunt, right? We have an ageist society. Bob Butler, the famous gerontology, just died. He coined the phrase ageism. And I've been thinking about his legacy a lot lately, and it's like, yeah, we've made some progress, but we still are so afraid of aging, and we're so afraid of issues of death, and we also think that all of aging is bad, that it's all about bad health and bad death. And I gotta tell you, we're seeing 90 and 100-year-olds who are living incredibly empowered, active lives that our stereotypes of aging don't really address anymore. But I think there's another reason that there's a perception by some in the engineering and then in the venture capital community that there aren't hard technical problems to solve. hey, it's cool to think about re-engineering tissues in the body, and that's a hard science problem. They don't think there's hard science problems embedded in this. But I got to tell you, designing an intelligent system to actually help somebody take their meds at exactly the right moment, or to actually button their shirt, or to intervene when they're making tea, is an enormously complicated scientific problem. And there's many PhDs to be minted in the creation of that, and lots of intellectual property to be generated.
We have run out of time for further questions, and we'll have to stop for the day. Join us next week when a panel of experts will discuss nuclear power, earthquakes, tsunamis, and disaster preparedness in Japan and Oregon. As we close, please join me in expressing our appreciation to today's guest, Eric Dishman. We are adjourned.